spiritual awakening to inspire your personal enlightened journey. I'm your host, Megan Mary, international best-selling metaphysical author and founder of Inner Realms Publishing. Let's bring in the light. Welcome. Today we have Dr. Karen Parker, PhD. She is the creator of Quantum Human Design and author of Quantum Wellness, Healing Your Mind, Body, and Spirit with Human Design. With more than 30 years of experience at the intersection of integrative medicine, energy psychology, and human design, she blends ancient wisdom with modern science to offer a revolutionary approach to holistic healing and personal transformation. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm really excited for this talk. We've had a number of people talking about integrative medicine or quantum healing, but not human design mixed with those elements. So I think this is going to really bring all of that full circle, and I'm excited to hear how they intersect. So my first question is, what does enlightenment mean to you?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a college course. But I think I could keep it pretty simple. To me, enlightenment is an integrated alignment with your human self and the cosmos, and recognizing that your job as a human is to translate the cosmic plan into the third dimension.
That's actually very astute for not having it planned. I like the translation of the multidimensional plan into the 3D reality. Yes.
That's why we have hands.
Yes. So first I'm going to go back a little bit and have you tell a little bit of your story of how you came to do the work that you're doing, and then we'll get into what human design is for those who don't know, and then what quantum human design is after that.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty old, so I'll try to keep this as condensed as possible. How I got here when I was 4. I mean, when I was 4 years old, I had an imaginary friend that told me while I was riding the back seat of my mother's car that my job was to teach love on the planet. And I feel pretty fortunate to have had that experience because I think I never really forgot my mission, if you will. And so that kind of led to a lot of serendipity and synchronicity and magic unfolding in my life from the very beginning. I'm a nurse by training, so that sort of brings in the traditional healthcare piece. But I was one of the very first life coaches trained in the world. I was trained with Thomas Leonard in 1998. I'm an energy psychology practitioner, and I've always been obsessed with not so much healing. I mean, we use the word healing because I think that's a word that we all relate to and it's pretty common, but I really have been obsessed with looking at how do we go beyond healing and really optimizing who we are. You know, healing brings us usually back to baseline. And I've always been really curious about, okay, great, baseline is awesome. That's like surviving, right? But if you think about the definition of survival, it's kind of minimal, right? You lived. I always want to know, how do we go from living to thriving? And so I have just been incredibly blessed on my path to have encountered amazing origin teachers, to have worked with many origin teachers, many modalities. And over the years, I've created some of my own and integrated a lot of what I've been blessed to learn.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's been a long journey for you. And I love that you started back with the imaginary friend because in childhood, that's what adults call them. But we all know that there are spirit guides around us all the time, and the children are closer to that dimension, and they're less jaded by cultural norms that say you can communicate with that. And I think in childhood was really where I felt closest to that as well, where I thought, well, this is all perfectly natural and possible until everyone starts telling you it's not, and you start suppressing that. So I like that you started there.
I actually love
And
that you said that too, because I'll tell you the secret between surviving and thriving is reconnecting with that on a consistent basis. I mean, I think we get we get into danger or we have life-threatening kinds of situations, we sort of have these accidental breakthroughs with source or our spirit team. But when we remember how to consistently cultivate a relationship with that, that is a key element to moving ourselves from surviving to thriving.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I would say integrating magic into everyday life,
Yeah.
because believing that all of that is possible brings us closer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really why I'm excited to always talk about the quantum realm. It's very much part of my work, what I write about, and where I spend a lot of my time. And so it's something that I think is so integral to our understanding of our reality and how we can shape our reality once we understand the quantum aspects to it. So where should we start? Should we start with quantum or should we start with human design?
We could do both at the same time.
Okay.
In 1999, my husband at the time went on a spiritual retreat and came back with a human design chart, which, if you've never seen a human design chart, it looks like a bunch of shapes. It's a big triangle that's made out of a bunch of shapes and lines. And I instantly knew when I encountered that, when I saw that chart, that I had to learn everything about it. It is an incredibly powerful personality assessment tool that is based on Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, and Judaic Kabbalah, and quantum physics. And that encounter with that chart set me on a journey to really learn everything I could about it. We moved with our kids from Houston to Arizona, where I sort of serendipitously stumbled into the headquarters of Human Design America, which was at that time in Sedona, Arizona. And I got the opportunity to work there for several years. And in that time, I got to study with and work with Ra Uru Hu, who is the founder of traditional human design. And I loved it, and I loved human design, and I love traditional human design. It is an incredible, powerful tool to help people learn who you're not, first and foremost. That's a process that in human design we call deconditioning, right? So much of our growth process and our growth journey is figuring out that the life that we've been living and the way we've been responding to life is really actually not who we are. It's not our authentic self. So we always start with traditional human design as a really powerful tool to teach you how to interpret your story, who you are, your identity, and explore who aren't you as a part of the next part of the journey, which is learning who are you. So about 5 years into my traditional human design journey, I really felt strongly that I needed to leave the organization, that it was just time. It was time. I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn. And I took human design and started my own practice, integrated it with EFT, the emotional freedom techniques, I integrated it with flower essences. I'm always integrating things because I like to see all the parts work together. And I kept getting really interesting clients. I got this whole stream of clients who I would say were incredibly evolved, who had already done a lot of work, who were pretty clear about who they weren't, and actually also pretty clear about who they were. And they kept saying to me, I really love human design. There's something really, I can tell there's something in it here, but I don't like the language and it's not really fitting where I am right now. It would have fit me 10 years ago, but it doesn't fit where I am right now. And that sat with me pretty significantly. And it sat with me significantly because when I worked with Ra at Human Design America, one of the things that Ra said repeatedly was that he wasn't done teaching the system, that one day he would write a version of the system that was for the awakened person, because the way it was being taught originally was not the whole story. Well, Ra passed in 2011 and he didn't get to complete that work. And his words and his idea of there's more, and then the words of my clients just kept coming back to me again and again. And so in 2013, I decided that I would revisit all the core elements of the chart and explore how could I expand on this prescription that was so powerful to bring people back to baseline. How could I take that information in traditional human design and evolve it? So human design as a system is it's really a synthesis of ancient and modern archetypes. And I like to use it as a storytelling tool, and it's a storytelling tool that has a lot of different layers and lots of different vocabulary words, right? Because there's, it's based on all these different ancient and modern modalities. It's filled with archetypes at all levels of synthesis of the chart. So I took all the vocabulary words from traditional human design with a big giant thesaurus. I use a Rodell thesaurus. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like a 6-inch thick thesaurus. And I went into a cymatics lab, a sound lab, and for 3 years I started testing language and measuring the frequency of language. And over time, I actually rewrote all of the traditional human design language and created a high frequency word, a vocabulary words for traditional human design. So I used that, and then I redid the definition so that we could have a more evolved definition of how does this archetype express itself on a quantum level and a cosmic level and in an awakened level. So I synthesized those two pieces, traditional human design and quantum human design, and teach both to my students now because you need both. You absolutely need both. You need to learn who you're not. You need to get comfortable living as yourself. And at a certain point, then we become ready to then go to that next level to really live that more awakened path of how do we optimize this person that we're born to be.
Yes, I love how you tested the frequencies of the words. That's fascinating. And I also love how you answered the call of the
Mm.
incomplete version, uncompleted version of that next version of the human design, that you knew that it had that next level and its founder didn't get to complete it, and it was almost your path to take it that next step.
Well, and I would lovingly and gently say that I think a lot of people have heard that call in different ways, which I think is the really interesting part about human design. Because human
Mm-hmm.
design is a revealed system. It was actually channeled, I think, if you want to use that word, in its inception over an 8-day channeling experience. The founder actually received this wisdom, and it took him a lot of years to get it out of his system in the teaching process. And I think the system itself came onto the planet at a time when we're really in a significant shift in consciousness as a tool to help people really connect with their inner wisdom and their intuition and get back into their body so they can navigate the world, especially as it shifts and changes. And I think because of the shifting, changing landscape, the system itself seems to be evolving. I have met so many people over the years who have reinterpreted it in such beautiful and loving ways. It's very cool to watch the trajectory of the system and kind of take on a life of its own through the brilliant brains and hearts of so many really interesting people and
Mm-hmm.
well-intending people.
Yes, yes. And I think in the beginnings of my podcast, I had a guest on Josephine Sorcier who works with the gene keys, which is a
Mhm.
variation of the
Mhm.
human design. And so I really love the Myers-Briggs and all of the different analysis, right? Because I'm a very analytical person in terms of putting in your information and finding out all of that stuff about yourself. And on the one hand, it's very structured, but on the other hand, it can be so validating.
Mhm.
Because especially if you're like I am an INFJ in the Myers-Briggs, and that's only 1 or 2% of the female population, and it's a very unusual personality type. And so once you mirror that back to yourself, you realize that's exactly talking about me. And now it explains
Mhm.
so much. And I don't feel bad that I'm not XYZ,
Yeah.
like everyone's been telling me. Or if when you were raised, if someone said you're just too sensitive, or all those types of things, that it validates why you are the way you are,
Yeah.
and that it's okay, and that that's actually your superpower. And so, these stories that we tell ourselves to try and explain away or deprogram ourselves
Mhm.
because everyone else is putting their expectations on us, and we feel we have to fill this role. And then we don't feel that we are doing it right because of what other people say. And then once we have these validations, we realize that our gifts and our pathways are completely intentional and are assets.
Hmm. Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think, I think human design could be sort of in that same category for sure as, I mean, I certainly would say I have done over the years thousands of readings, and hands down, I think the biggest effect of a reading in the beginning is that idea, as you just said, of permission, or even affirmation that, oh, this is why I am how I am. I think my favorite, I did a reading once for a 76-year-old woman, and she had a very unusual design. And at the end of the reading, she said, oh my God, I feel like I have been seen for the first time in my life. And I love that story, but it also kind of broke my heart, like to think that she'd been here for 76 years and no one had really, she had not felt really seen. And that's an essential part, again, of that healing arc of affirming who you are, owning who you are, taking back stewardship of who you are, especially once you figured out who you're not, to really have the vocabulary and what, and I always say, I don't care what system you use, as long as you find a system that you resonate with, that brings you back to yourself, and really doesn't just bring you back to yourself, but helps you remember your brilliance, your gifts, as you said, your those places where maybe you've had resistance to yourself, and you start to reinterpret that and say, oh, you know what, that's actually a superpower. That's my superpower. I think that's the most essential piece of healing that we need to be doing on the planet right now. And then optimizing it, taking it to the next level, to evolving yourself and your story one level further, or even more. I don't like to say levels because it keeps going, right? You don't ever stop evolving.
Yeah, and that's really that self-actualization process. It's letting go of the naysayers, of the critiquers, of the inner critic that has told you that the way you react is wrong, that the way you deal with challenges is wrong, that the way you work or emotionally process is wrong. All of those things that comprise our behavior and our personality. And you let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And once that falls away, you recognize that the way you are doing that is something that you can own, be
Mm-hmm.
proud of, step into, and not just understand, but value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that too, because that the term self-actualization, as you know, comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one of the things that at the end of his life that he did is he actually added another tier to the pyramid, which was self-transcendence. And his theory was that once we self-actualize, at a certain point in time, we turn our lives back to contribute ourselves, contribute who we are back to the world. And I mean, to me, that is the ultimate sweet spot of optimization, that at a certain point when we self-actualize, we have to live there and celebrate it and integrate it and internalize it. But at a certain point, when we start to move from self actualized to self transcendent, then we are optimizing all those superpowers and using those superpowers not just to understand ourselves, but to actually be in service to the world.
100%. Yes. And that is why I am on this podcast.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Because being an introvert and not wanting to be seen was a big journey for me in when I was called to do the podcast, and I was afraid to be on video, and I was afraid to record my voice, and I was afraid to be seen. And overcoming that and all of the ego death that I had to go through in my spiritual awakening led me to have the confidence to do that
Mhm.
and therefore be in service
Mhm.
to everyone else that needed that, to resonate with that message and to hold space for everyone else who has messages to share. It just all became that from me taking that step
Mhm.
and embracing who I was, but also letting my egoic perception of who I was, that I was so desperately clinging to and trying to protect, letting that fall away and step aside from that so that I could do the service that I felt I was being called to do, which is really unlocking that human potential, right?
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
If you are enjoying my podcast and are intrigued by dreams and stories of spiritual awakening, I would like to personally invite you to explore my international best-selling metaphysical trilogy, Witches of Maple Hollow. Like a mystical fairy tale, these fall-themed mysteries weave cozy supernatural fantasy into enchanting tales of magic and self-discovery. Start with Book 1, The Dream Haunters. The Book Life Prize calls it packed to the brim with surprise portals, ancient traditions, and dream worlds. Then dive into the elusive nature of reality in the Dream Mirrors. And finally, unravel ancestral riddles beyond time and space in the Dream Dimensions. Get your exclusive signed copies today at meganmary.com. Stop by the store while you're there and grab your dream journals, cozy blankets, pillows, candles, and more. And don't forget, they also are available in audiobook. Come visit me in Maple Hollow. So, what is, in your mind, the connection between language and mindset? Because I know you talked about recording all the words from the thesaurus
Mhm.
and the frequency that they hold. And I believe that very much our minds believe every word we say, and our body hears everything we say and think, and that all of that resonance surrounds us, and that we are living in a resonance chamber, basically, and that we are just manifesting from our energy for good or bad. And that is the school of this
Mhm.
reality, in my view. So for you, how do you think those intersect, and how does that shape our biology?
Well, the words we use and the stories we tell have an incredible impact on our biology. And I would say we're just still learning about this. It's a fairly new field of research. We call it the field of narrative psychology. And I actually did my research in the field of psychoneuroimmunology. We know that the words we speak can organize all the different aggregates of our neurobiology to program the brain to start noticing things that match the words we speak or the stories we tell. So if you tell a story, especially if you start telling it consistently, because the brain is so efficient and also so good at getting organized, it actually organizes your perception so that you start to perceive things in such a way that it matches your story. We know that the words we speak and the stories we tell can impact our immune system. That when we tell stories that are disempowering or rooted in victimhood or trigger emotions such as anger, that actually causes our IgA levels, our immune response, to go down. We know that the words we speak, the stories we tell, can actually regulate some of our gene expression. They turn genes on or off. That's why optimists live longer and they have healthier telomeres, because language and attitude significantly impacts their body and their health. Language is phenomenally powerful on a physiological level. Think about this for a minute. If I say the word money to you, right now in that second when you heard the word money, you just turned light into matter, because when you hear the word money, or whoever's listening, when you heard the word money, your brain produced a photon storm. That photon storm, that's light. That's how the nervous system works. That photon storm caused your brain to produce neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters, whichever neurotransmitters you created within your body a brief emotional response. Now, if the emotions you generated were positive because you have good, healthy meanings about money, those positive emotions in turn calibrate your heart into a state of coherence, which is a highly creative, highly healthy state to exist in. If you have negative meanings about money, so let's say I say the word money and you're like, I hope I have rent, right? And that, that creates a fear-based response or negative emotions because money is a relationship you're working on healing. That stress response actually creates emotions that trigger a low grade fight or flight, and actually moves you out of creative thinking and shuts down the creative part of your brain, because when we're in stress, the creative part of our brain shuts down. There are so many different ways that I could tell you that it affects the body, but it also, it doesn't just affect the body, it affects our resilience. We now know that when we can start to reframe the way in which we see our lives and our stories, and really look at our lives through the lens of the hero's journey, and reinterpret our challenges as adventures that our hero had to go on, that over time we start to recognize when we're challenged that that's just a growth edge. And when we understand that that's just a growth edge, we become more resilient. We're better able to stand in the midst of chaos and anchor ourselves and not react, and be more and more intentional in what we create in the face of shifting environments and a shifting world.
Hmm. Two things came to mind as you were saying that last part, because I was reviewing my traditional human design chart prior to our call, and my life theme is the left angle cross of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
which, as I understand it, means that I adapt well to unpredictable situations. And that phrase came to me, challenge point, and it was like, this is where in your life you are faced with a situation, whether it be in a relationship or with your health or with your career or whatever, where you realize, okay, that I am being called to create a solution for
Mm-hmm.
this now. And what used to work isn't going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I can either lay down and, commiserate about this, or I can rise to the challenge. We all encounter these crossroads
Mm-hmm.
in our lives, and how we interpret and tell the story of those challenge points
Mm-hmm.
is whether we bounce back resiliently from them or not.
Yes. When we tell our life story, we have a tendency to end our life story at the end of a cliffhanger and identify with what happened to us at the end of a cliffhanger. So, if let's say if you have something happens in your life, let's say you get divorced, right? And that's the cliffhanger in the story. We tend to start building an identity around that cliffhanger experience. Really, we start identifying and cultivating our identity in the middle of the story. And as we continue to repeat and tell that story, and oftentimes that story is being told from a victim perspective, and we start telling it because A, it gets us support, B, sometimes that story becomes protective, right? We don't want to risk making the same kind of mistake again, or going through the same kind of pain again, right? But when we don't start including the redemption arc, and as you said, that interpretation of, okay, I got divorced, it was hard, it was painful, but it taught me how to come back to myself. It gave me access to a new way of understanding my power and who I am. If we don't go on and include the redemption arc in the story, we stay stuck at that cliffhanger. And what happens is we reprogram ourselves, because remember, the brain is really efficient. When we're telling the story from the cliffhanger perspective again and again and again, we're programming our mind to keep seeing that cliffhanger experience around us, and ultimately we begin to re-experience it again. We get stuck in a tape loop where we have a tragedy, we identify with it, we build an identity around it, we program ourselves that this is who I am and this is what my life is about, and then we start calling in experiences that match it vibrationally, and we get stuck. So one of the things we have to start doing, especially when we have those challenge points, is to start saying, okay, this is a challenge point, but I have to also pay attention to what comes next, and cultivate an identity, not from the cliffhanger part of the story, but from who do I grow into becoming as a result of this experience, and make sure we don't get stuck in the cliffhanger piece and bring ourselves all the way full to the end of the story.
Yeah, I actually ran across not that long ago the concept of writing as your future self, journaling as your future self. And I think what's so powerful about that is that you're fast forwarding past the cliffhanger,
Hmm.
past the redemption arc, to reflecting back on the redemption arc and the cliffhanger, and you're quantum leaping yourself
Hmm.
into that new identity that you're hoping to achieve.
Yes. Yes. And on a physiological level, the brain doesn't know the difference because the brain thinks in metaphors. The brain is actually an incredibly powerful storytelling tool. And so when we start shifting our perspective and even shifting where we are in our perspective on the timeline, the brain doesn't know the difference. And so you start to program the brain then from that point of view and from that place on the timeline to start noticing things that match that new story.
Right. And I think it's so powerful and interesting and important to repeat over and over because people don't understand that they are creating their reality. They think that reality is a set, objective foundation
Mhm.
that we interact with, and either we like it or we don't, and things just happen to us. And all these approaches to our default consciousness. And we don't realize how much our brain is affecting the perception of our world and how much we can actually change that. We feel default powerless. And all of these modalities serve to empower us
Mhm.
to actually realize that we do have the ability, that we are strong creators,
Mhm.
that we can shift.
Mhm.
And so what would your advice be for, the first step of someone who says, I wish it was that easy. I'm totally stuck or overwhelmed and I'm just operating in survival mode and I would love to get out of this, but I feel powerless in my situation.
So I think the very first thing that I would encourage someone to do, and this is tricky because our conditioning is such that we are resistant to this idea because we think, oh, that can't possibly work. But I'll tell you, science is showing us if you're stuck, sit down and write your story. And write the story from the perspective of where you are now, become the main character in the story, take yourself through a creative writing process, ask yourself, what do I want instead? And then using creative thoughts, using any kind of creative process you want to create, you can take yourself through the storytelling process into the fulfillment of where you'd like to be. Sit with it for 30, 45 minutes, get a bunch of really fun colored pens, get some really fun paper, get yourself some glitter. I can't tell you how healing glitter is. Literally sit down and just using a creative writing process, take your main character and walk them through the redemption arc and get them to where you want them to be. You can add superpowers. You can call in angels, fairies, guides, whatever you want to call in, unicorns. You can do it on a different planet. You can get a cape. You can have whatever you want in that story because the brain doesn't know the difference because the brain thinks in stories. The brain isn't going to think, oh, you can't possibly have a cape. The brain is going to hear, oh, you have superpowers. And the more you start to play and create in that right side, sensual, creative part of the brain instead of that left sided, linear, logical, time oriented part of the brain, the more you actually break out of self doubt, the more you start programming the brain to see other opportunities and possibilities, and the more you start programming your identity to go beyond where you're stuck in the moment.
Excellent advice. I'm so glad that you are encouraging the listeners to write because, of course, creative writing is so close to my heart. And it was a very large part of my healing process was
Mm-hmm.
doing just that.
Mm-hmm.
Starting the story that I wrote that became a trilogy that was one woman's spiritual awakening and
Mm-hmm.
discovering her powers, putting myself into the story
Mm-hmm.
and creating a world that I would love to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing all of the quantum aspects, bringing them all in to the
Mm-hmm.
story. And so I love that advice, and I encourage everybody to try it out and yeah, use glitter as well.
Well, and the story is the medicine. You know, really, the
It
story is
is.
medicine. And so Take back control over the story. Sometimes you can't control all the other stuff in the moment, but you can always control the story, and you can
Yeah.
always ultimately control your perspective on the story.
Right. And it's so true that our brains do think in stories. And that's why dreams many times are stories. And the stories that we tell ourselves during the day come out
Mhm.
when we are in the dream world. And we can reprogram those stories. We can restory those stories, whether they're our dream stories or our waking stories. And they do start to reflexively affect each other and influence each other in a positive or negative way, depending on what you're focusing on, right? We have that ability to spiral into negativity just as much as we do have the ability to manifest positivity.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it's all within our grasp. And that's one of the biggest challenges is recognizing that.
Well, and I would say it's also learning to train ourselves to take back control over the perspective. And that goes back to recognizing that we are malleable and we can change our own inner environment. And really that's always the first essential step if you want to change the outer environment is do it on the inside first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So where can people find you to find out more about your quantum human design and all of the other work that you do in integrative medicine?
So the best place to learn more about me is to go to our website, quantumhumandesign.com. On that website, you can actually run your free quantum human design chart. It'll come with a little report so you can start really exploring your human design and learning more about your energy dynamics. All of my books are available on all major online retail outlets like Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, Amazon. If you search my name, you can find my books. Quantum Wellness, my new book, is on all of those retail outlets. And of course, we're on social. You can search for Dr. Karen Parker 22. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube. We have a really fun YouTube channel with lots of great videos and lessons. And learn more about yourself.
Amazing. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes, and I will also add your book to the Women's Dream Enlightenment podcast guest book list that's on bookshop.org. And I also have an Amazon list as well. So it'll be on both of those places. And thank you so much for being here today, Karen, and sharing all of your research and insights. I really appreciate it. And I hope that it helps the listeners on their path as they discover more about themselves.
Absolutely, me too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Did you enjoy this episode? Be sure to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Head over to my YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button as well to be part of my growing community. Are you ready to take the next step in your spiritual journey? Don't miss out on the new Dream Empowerment programs. Unique opportunities for you to unlock your inner wisdom, discover your authenticity, align with your higher self, and bring abundance into your life. If you'd like your dream or awakening story featured on my show, submit it today. Your dreams have the power to inspire and enlighten other women on their journey. Visit meganmary.com to find out more.